Hi, my name is Helenya Apostolou and I am a full-time artist, probably best known for making light reactive art. Today is the 6th of January 2025, another day here on planet Earth. So my background is a little bit all over the place. I grew up mainly in North Wales and also spent time with my father and Greek Cypriot family in Cyprus. I would say that I have a very creative and perhaps slightly unconventional family. Creativity has been really valued by all the people around me. I grew up with a lot of music. My grandma's an artist. My sister loves making stuff, and my mum too. You know, musicians, actors, photographers, storytellers, all that creative goodness is sort of my background, luckily. But yeah, I think because of all of that, I felt super supported in whatever I wanted to do. And you know, after secondary school, I wanted to just go and study fine art at uni because I didn't really know what else to do. I mean, I loved making stuff and I seemed to be quite good at it. And it also felt limitless. At school, I was academic and a bit of an overachiever, but I felt like with art, there was like a freedom. And more than anything, I just loved to be alone and make stuff. And so I went to study art at the University of Leeds and I learned so much and I absolutely loved it. Art school was definitely not for everyone. I think it was really hard because how do you teach or examine like a way of thinking? I don't know, but mainly it helped with sort of expanding my creative thinking. And also it was really good for meeting other creatives and just providing a safe space to make anything in. Like, it didn't have to be something sellable or commercialized. It could just be whatever I wanted it to be. And yeah, I think that's when things really clicked for me. Like, art's not a commodity. It's more of a verb, I suppose. Creativity's existed for so much longer than capitalism. So the end goal is really to express and enjoy the process. I think that can get lost if you don't necessarily come from like a monetarily wealthy background. Like, if you have to make ends meet, then you can't just sit and enjoy the process, you know? So uni was a safe space for me to discover that. But then on the flip side, I also learned how to market myself and I got a bit more of an insight into the formalities of the art world as opposed to like the fluid, intuitive creativeness that I had from my beautiful family. So yeah, it gave me a lot of opportunities for creative collaborations and exhibitions that helped ground the idea of being an artist in reality. And it kind of, more than anything, made being an artist seem like a plausible career path, whereas before I'd never really thought of it in that way. So yeah, I would say it's definitely had a really positive impact on my creative practice. I got to study in Marseille, which was amazing as well, and exhibit my work internationally. But yeah, it kind of felt like two opposing dualities sort of coming together, which has probably influenced my practice since it kind of hinges on the bringing together of multiple things. So a bit more detail on what kind of art I make. I make work that is both still and moving image. I use colour theory and RGB and CMYK to create opposites of each other, and it ends up creating like this stop motion animation effect but with LED lights. Some people have described my work as like real life GIFs, and I actually really like that idea because it kind of bridges the gap between the online and offline worlds. In my work, the bringing together of opposites feels really important. I suppose that's also come from my family background. As a creative and wonderful and loving family, I think there was also quite a lot of separateness, like two paths. My mum and dad split up like amicably, but when I was 4, and then there's also a fair amount of like interfamilial dynamics that I think I've always been seeking to repair and sort of stick back together. So maybe that's where that idea of bringing opposites together within my practice comes from. I don't know. But then more than that, there's the spiritual beliefs of both my mother and father, which have absolutely shaped my relationship with my creativity. It sounds a bit poncy now, but it's also just true. Like, they meditated a lot when I was growing up, and so I had some spiritual experiences from quite young, which definitely shaped the way I see the world and the universe. So yeah, of course that comes through in my work. Yeah. A lot of my pieces are about letting go and returning to this like state of collective unconscious, I suppose. And that concept definitely came to me from my mum and dad. So I suppose There's a lot of influence from my background. Then also, in terms of subject depiction, my upbringing in the countryside definitely helped inspire me too. I think the quietness and stillness of a rural upbringing really helps inspire creativity. I mean, I have two sisters, but I grew up as sort of an only child because they're a lot older than I am. So I would get bored pretty easily, and drawing was always my way of filling the time. And then, of course, nature is also absolutely beautiful, and the movement and the slow growth of natural things like flowers and trees and all the greenery, they've definitely inspired me, and I've recently released a collection of paintings based on that too. I think a huge and probably somewhat subconscious influence on my practice is possibly also advertising and marketing. I suppose in life right now we are bombarded with a lot of colourful, vibrant, eye-catching posters or campaigns, which has kind of encouraged me to make work that perhaps has a similar effect of like catching attention, you know, like flashing lights, vivid colours, etc., etc. However, I'd say in terms of naming artists, I have been hugely inspired by both pop and op art. So you've got like your Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein for use of colour, and then even Keith Haring and David Hockney as well. And then for op art, I mean, Victor Vasarely, Bridget Riley, and actually primarily Peter Sedgley as well. I saw a piece of Peter Sedgley's at the Tate Modern probably about 6 years ago. It was one of his colour cycle series, and it absolutely mesmerised me. I had been making work to do with stop motion at the same time, so I'd been working with Play-Doh and clay to create animations, and I grew up loving all the Aardman productions and some of those stop motion animation Tim Burton movies, and I wanted to incorporate that into my work somehow, and I really liked the idea of storytelling within art. And then when I saw Sedgley's piece, I kind of ended up putting everything together and quite organically stumbling upon this technique which could meld painting and two-dimensional image with movement and storytelling too. It was actually only later that I realised it was a somewhat well-known and established technique from the 1920s. And I think it was originally used for set design, and it was coined by a Russian man called Adrian Samilov. So it's known as the Samilov technique, and it's when you use opposite colours on the colour wheel to sort of cancel each other out. So yeah, I also think in terms of influences, it's important for me to acknowledge like more contemporary artists that I love, like Felipe Pantone, Olafur Eliasson, I never know how to say his name, Karnowski, Takashi Murakami, and yeah, all of those sort of overlaps between my work and theirs. I mean, yeah, contemporary art inspires me to keep going with my stuff and solidifies the idea that there is a place for me within the contemporary art world. And also all of those other influences on across social media. I mean, there are so many unknown names and small businesses and content creators, which in the modern age is where a lot of people consume their creativity, and inevitably that has definitely had an impact on the way I think and make and create. So it's worth mentioning. Right now, I am focusing on making without limits. I'm trying to sort of churn out work that feels like it needs to come out. I don't think that makes much sense, but I am starting to be more intuitive with my practice and channel my creative ideas more freely without perhaps placing too much commercial value on them. I'm just trying to let them be what they are, and that's that. I think I'm really keen to focus on storytelling a bit more, get more emotion and feeling across. I mean, I still use 3 layers and 3 colours, but I'm starting to think about how they can be viewed all at once and still tell a story. I quite like using the layers and colours as sort of separate planes of reality that are different but happening all at once. It's really hard to put into words for me, but I suppose over the course of my practice, each colour has come to resemble a time frame or like a moment in time. And seeing all of the frames at once in natural lighting ends up telling a completely different story to when they are isolated under RGB lights and creating that animation story. But yeah, it's more like the idea of coexistence between different worlds, and I guess like the reality of dualities. But yeah, anyway, I really need to work on how to express that idea more clearly. Which leads into the discussion of what challenges there are in being an artist. I mean, I think there are so many I can't really pinpoint just one. I mean, for me, I suppose it's time, money management. I just want to make and draw stuff and get completely lost in that. I don't want to sit down and answer emails or conceptualize my practice, because I would love to just be able to work from feeling. But that's not how it works. I really struggle to market myself, and I feel like my work sits on that border of commercial market and the fine art market. But the art world feels a little bit elusive for me. I think the challenge is to put yourself out there and keep facing rejection. You do, as an artist, have to get really, really good at handling rejection, at picking yourself back up again and reapplying for another gallery or exhibition or prize or anything that might get you noticed, basically. And the irony is that when you do get noticed, you've then got to deal with imposter syndrome. So I actually wrote a bit about that in the past. I've got a little blog post on my website if anyone wants to read it. There we go, marketing done. But anyway, so maybe the real challenge is marketing. I'm really lucky to live in an age where I can post on social media and gain a following. But even that at the moment feels quite superficial, and it's detracting from what I really want to spend my time doing, which is making art. But I can't neglect to mention how fortunate I've been in that situation. That's really got a lot of eyes on my work and meant that I can go full time from sales and things. So if you're one of those people, thank you. I think if I were to do it all over again, or have to go back in time and say something to younger me, I would just tell her to keep doing what she's doing. I mean, I'm fairly content with things as they are right now. I suppose I would just encourage her to believe in herself and her art and her expression, and remind her that there is plenty of space for artists in the world. I would tell my younger self that her work is enough just because it comes from her. You don't have to be special to make art. The way one individual sees the world is enough to make it interesting. And also be consistent. Don't give up, just keep being consistent. I think that's a huge thing. And keep exploring, keep trying new things. I mean, I've tried some pretty unconventional mediums. And actually techniques as well. I mean, I would say my entire practice seems to be pretty unconventional, in terms of utilising the light and filters. And for the last few years, I think my art has been partially revered for maybe its novelty. However, the technique that I use, the Samolov effect, it is getting more common, I think, and people are learning more about colour theory, etc. And I think maybe the novelty is wearing off, but the fact that I make my art, it's my self-expression, that means it's got value. So, but in the past, I also used to use Play-Doh, which I used to make loads of weird little sculptures. And obviously it was back in my art school uni days when I could just make what I wanted and not starve, but it was really fun, and I made over 1,000 tiny little squished Play-Doh sculptures that I left to dry and hold their shape. So that's probably the most unconventional material I've used. I also really love sound and music. I play instruments, I play guitar and clarinet, and I absolutely love to sing, but I kind of see that somewhat separate to my art practice. I tend to not listen to music so much when I'm creating, although working in silence is a no-go. I mean, sometimes I will spend the odd hour or two painting in my own world with whatever going on in the background, but usually I really need a story or a podcast to capture my imagination and hold me in that flow state. I think when I'm engrossed in listening to something else, I can enter into that non-judgmental brain state where you're just making, and then when it's over you step back and be like, wait, how did I do that? I can't really explain it, but it feels like noise or a story or some sort of thread kind of tethers me to the real world, and it captures and distracts my waking brain so that the art can then come out more easily from the other part of my mind, if that makes any sense. I don't know, but basically I love painting with audiobooks playing, so I really like fictional stories. I think the best reaction I've ever had to my art was probably when 2 artists actually came all the way from Germany to come and see my paintings. They'd seen it online and they wanted to come and meet me and see my work in real life, and that was just amazing. I mean, they turned up I had a little exhibition and they came, and it made me feel like a proper artist. I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I guess in person, like, the best reaction is always just someone being like, whoa, that's so cool. And then silently standing and engaging with the work. I love it when people slow down and they really just be with the art, and they just observe and be present, or get lost in that kind of like repetitive cycle of movement. I mean, that's exactly how I felt when I first saw Peter Sedgley's work. It's how I felt. It's how I feel when I listen to stories. It's how I feel when I see colourful, beautiful paintings, and you want to look at all the details and understand how it works. And yeah, it's such an honour when somebody reacts to my work in the same way, you know. I think it gives me so much joy because I really hope that people can take away something, or like whatever they need to, which is a bit of a useless answer, but yeah, I guess the aim to create more experiential art and immersive installations where people can forget about the outside world and just be mesmerized by something for a little while. Like, I want people to feel inspired and wowed by the optical illusion, at the same time as connected and held by the emotions and stories that I try to depict. So yeah, I don't know, I'm not so good with words. Anyway, I have rambled on for a very long time, and I hope it was at least partially interesting for whoever might be listening right now. Hello. If you do want to give me a follow on social media, my username is Helenya_art, but you could probably find whatever you needed just by typing Helenya Apostolou into Google or something anyway. I don't think there's many other people with that name. So, yeah. And then the final thing would be, if you want to learn how to use colour theory and lights and make my sort of style of artwork, or express yourself in a similar way, I actually have a little course coming out soon, because I don't want to be all gatekeepery about the techniques I use and stuff, and I think really the world needs more art, so I'd love to facilitate that for whoever felt inspired. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and for listening. Have a lovely day.